I'm Angela, 28 years old. I used to live with my parents and my older sister, Michelle, but she moved out 2 years ago after getting married. I run an online business from home. My interest in app development began in middle school when my grandfather gifted me a computer on my birthday, which led to great success. However, my beloved grandfather passed away 3 years ago. He had lived with us and was my only confidant. After his death, I've become more reclusive. My parents work during the day, and I work alone in silence. They don't understand my work, seeing me only as a shut-in playing games. Michelle has always looked down on me too. My motivation in computers was largely due to being neglected by my family. My parents always favored Michelle, paying little attention to me. I grew up enduring this, while my grandparents were the only ones who showed me love and spent most of their time with me. On my 14th birthday, my grandparents gifted me a computer, leading to my current career. I've never received a birthday gift from my parents. Now, with both of my grandparents gone, my room is the only place for me in this house. Still, I don't truly hate my parents, who gave birth to me and raised me, so I try to help around the house as much as possible. On a Sunday morning, "Angela, is breakfast ready?" My mother suddenly asks after opening my room's door past 9 a.m. Yes, it's on the table ready to be eaten. Since my grandfather's death, I've taken over the household chores. My parents think it's natural for me since I'm always playing games. I prepare all meals and handle cleaning, laundry, and shopping. Oh, did you see your dad? He had breakfast early and left. Dad's gone out again, huh? Recently, Dad has been leaving the house early in the morning on weekends. While it's not that he and Mom don't get along, he generally can't say no to her. He probably heads out early to avoid the busy schedule Mom tends to plan for him on his days off. However, since I hardly remember having a conversation with Dad since my middle school days, this is all just speculation. Michelle and her family will visit around noon today. Michelle is coming. Don't be so surprised she's your sister, after all. It's been a while since you've seen each other, hasn't it? It's definitely been a while. I think this is the first time she's come home since she got married, isn't it? Although my sister got married 2 years ago and has gone out to eat with Dad and Mom, she hasn't visited our home until now. When she was pregnant, she didn't come home, and our parents went to see her. Is there something important going on? I guess she wouldn't come without a good reason. Yeah, she mentioned she has something to talk about. She is coming home after such a long time, so make sure to prepare a nice lunch. Right? I got it. Despite my eagerness to meet my nephew, I feel uneasy due to Michelle's past coldness towards me. Realizing I hadn't received this month's grocery money yet, I asked, "Mom, can I get this month's food money? I'm about to go shopping. Didn't you get it from your father? He told me to get it from you. I don't have any money on me. Last month, I only received $50. I need the full amount this month. No, here's $30. She slams the money on the table. If you worked properly, this wouldn't happen. How long will you play around? I've told you I am working. I don't want to hear excuses. You're just playing games for pocket money. Don't talk about working when you can't live on your own. That's not true. Enough. I've given you some money. Get the rest from your father." With that, she stormed out as she slammed the door. After letting out a deep sigh, I returned to my work. Once I reached a good stopping point, I headed out to do some shopping. With an uneasy feeling lingering, I rushed to finish my shopping by early afternoon, as I had heard that my sister would be arriving around that time. After I returned home, I started cooking immediately while my mother watched the TV to relax. My father returned just before noon, and soon, the doorbell rang on schedule. "Glad you could come, Michelle. Come in quickly." My mother's cheerful voice is audible. I'm back. It feels nostalgic returning to this house after so long. "Welcome back, Michelle. It's been a while." "Oh, Angela, you're still here." Seeing Michelle for the first time in a long time, She was dressed in designer brands from head to toe, with heavier makeup. Her triumphant smile directed at me hadn't changed at all. "I'm so tired," Michelle exclaimed as she flopped down onto the sofa. As I looked for my nephew, I saw my mother holding him. His surprised and wide-eyed expression as he looked around was adorable. "What are you looking at? Hurry up and get lunch ready," my mother said coldly, noticing me looking at my nephew. "Mom, are you still making Angela do all the housework?" Michelle asked in a mockingly curious tone. "Of course. She just holes up in her room playing games all day, so she might as well be useful." "That's true. She costs money just by being here." My mother and Michelle continued their conversation cheerfully. I tried to engage Michelle in normal conversation by asking about her married life. "How's married life, Michelle?" "It must be tough with childcare and housework." I carefully chose my words to speak to Michelle. "I don't do any housework. I absolutely hate the idea of bustling about with household chores to do every day like you do." "What do you mean?" "We have a housekeeper. So I don't have to do anything." I remembered that Michelle's husband is a doctor. When their marriage was decided, my mother and Michelle were overjoyed about her marrying into money. Wow, having a housekeeper must be nice. "Is your husband busy with work?" "Yes, he is. He's hardly at home even on his days off because of emergency calls." Considering my relationship with Michelle, this was a decent conversation. However, Michelle seemed unsatisfied and stopped me as I went to finish preparing the meal. "You have such an easy life. Do you realize how much our parents struggle?" "What? You're still lying about working, aren't you? At your age, you should realize that because you're not independent, Mom has to work." "Well, I've told you and Mom many times, but I do work from home and earn enough. You don't need to worry. If that's true, then move out and live on your own. You say you're earning, but it's probably just pocket money, right? You say that because you've never really struggled." Like our mother, Michelle didn't believe I was actually working and thought I was just living off my parents without the means to be independent. "I stay in this house because it belonged to Grandpa and Grandma. It's filled with precious memories for me. I can't believe you're squatting here for that reason. If it were me, I wouldn't want to stay in such an old house. The house is old but has been renovated for accessibility for my grandfather, and the kitchen and bathroom have been remodeled. The appliances have also been gradually replaced with newer ones, so I don't feel inconvenienced." Although our grandparents loved Michelle just as much, she probably felt bothered by their remarks and attitudes, hence she has no attachment to this house. "I think the best thing for someone like me was to marry into wealth, but that's impossible for you." My mother snickered at Michelle's words. "You can't get married, you can't show your parents our grandchild's face, and you don't even try to live on your own. You're really useless." "I don't think marriage is everything. I live on the money I earn myself, and I'm fine with that." "Stop saying that, and quit lying already. Dad, Mom, and I are all tired of your lies." Just then, my nephew started crying, and my mother glared at me. I fled her gaze and went back to the kitchen to silently continue preparing lunch. Frustrated, I concluded that explaining anything further to Michelle and our mother would be futile. Despite her criticisms, Michelle ate everything I had prepared. I had heard that Michelle had something important to discuss that day, but she left in the evening without mentioning anything. However, I noticed something concerning about Michelle's behavior. She was checking various parts of the house like the upstairs rooms, the bathroom, and the kitchen. We had been gradually remodeling since Michelle moved out, and her detailed inspections felt ominous. But she left without any issues that day, and I wondered when we would meet next. The next morning, while I was preparing breakfast, my mother suddenly spoke up. "Make sure the house is tidy by next Sunday, and prepare dinner well. Michelle, Dylan, and the kids are coming." "Next week?" "They just came yesterday." "What are they coming for? And why is her husband coming too?" I bombarded my mother with questions in surprise. It's nothing to be so surprised about. Their family. Michelle said they have something important to discuss. There's something for you too, so keep your schedule free. I'm just happy I'll see the kids again. What could it possibly be about? I was filled with anxiety. Michelle hadn't shown her face since getting married, and now suddenly she decided to come again next week after visiting recently, this time with her husband. It all felt very strange. I pondered Michelle's intentions but couldn't come up with anything. However, unbeknownst to me, Michelle and our mother were having discussions. Can you believe the house is in Angela's name? What was Dad thinking? Don't worry, Mom. If we tell Angela everyone's burdened by her, she'll leave. The right to live in this house belongs to us. I was so caught up in work that before I knew it, it was already Sunday. The first time I met Michelle's husband, Dylan, was when he came to our house to formally introduce himself for their wedding. He had decided to become a doctor influenced by his father, and although he was handsome, I remember feeling a chill in his demeanor. My mother, thrilled to hear he was the son of a doctor, welcomed him with great joy. However, since then until today, Dylan has not visited our home, and neither my parents nor I have seen him since the wedding. In such a situation, I welcomed Michelle, my nephew, and Dylan after setting the dinner on the table. When I took another look at Dylan, he seemed to have lost a little weight compared to 2 years ago. As I returned to the kitchen, Michelle followed. Did you pick up these side dishes from some supermarket? I wonder if they will suit our tastes since we always eat high-quality food. This is a dish I made myself, taught by Grandma, so I can assure you of its quality. Unable to respond, Michelle looked displeased for a moment, but then quickly put on a caring wife's face and began serving the dishes. During dinner, Michelle mostly bragged about how her child was superior to others. Throughout dinner, Dylan barely spoke, seeming distant even as he listened to Michelle's stories. Seeing our adorable child. Don't you wish you had another grandchild? Michelle shot a malicious glance at me, seemingly ready to use me as a target again. Indeed, we could have had another grandchild by now, but that's impossible since Angela's not even married. Before even thinking of children, finding a marriage partner is essential, isn't it? And with you always in your room playing games, how could you possibly meet anyone? And to top it off, you're unemployed and still living at home. After enduring such harsh insults, I had finished my meal and was about to leave the table when my mother spoke to me in a voice filled with anger. Planning to leave the table by yourself? We're not done here. There's an important discussion coming up, so sit down and listen. Let's get to the point. Angela, can you please leave this house? My sister's abrupt request left me speechless. Just try living on your own for once. Both Dad and Mom are at their limit living with you. If things continue this way, you won't change. It almost sounded like she was saying it was for my own good that I should move out and live on my own, as if she was reluctantly advising me. You really should realize how much of a disappointment you are. Learning to earn enough to live on your own and understanding the harshness of society would do you some good. Wait, Mom. How many times do I have to say I'm working and earning my own money? When will you understand? My hands trembled with anger as I spoke, frustrated that they never listened. Just because you make a little money from your hobbies doesn't mean you're earning a living. No, I earn enough every month to pay for my own expenses. Plus, I paid for all the renovations in this house. I funded the renovations after our grandfather's death with the money I had saved from my job. My parents were aware of this because they hadn't made any of the payments. You think you're something, don't you? That money was Grandpa's, wasn't it? What? Did you think I didn't know? You received money from Grandpa before he passed away. Grandfather had indeed given me a bank book shortly before he died, which was the result of my grandparents saving up, worried about my future due to the neglect from my parents. They must have thought it would come in handy someday. What do you mean? How do you know about that? I had immediately stored the bank book in a drawer in my room and hadn't told a soul about it. It's obvious because I saw it in your drawer. I found it right away. "But where did you hide the cash card? I couldn't withdraw the money. How could you do something like that? That's despicable." I was stunned and deeply shocked. Those two were always nicer to you. But to think they left money behind for you, sidelining us, how dare they? Don't trample on Grandpa and Grandma's feelings. They left that money as they were thinking of my well-being. Feeling belittled by their disregard for my grandparents' intentions, my anger intensified. And then, I finally understood why my parents had never mentioned the renovation payments. They must have known about the bank book and had intended for me to handle the costs from the start. They assumed that I had covered the renovation costs with the money from the bank account I received. Let's forget about the money for now. Thanks to it, the old house has decent amenities, and the appliances are fairly new. It's infuriating that only you received it, but, well, I'll forgive you. Grandpa and Grandma probably foresaw that you'd struggle to be independent and jobless. The inside of the house is clean, and the appliances are quite nice. Was Michelle's sudden inspection of the house meant to check on these improvements? As your sister, I'm really worried about you. You understand that, right? I just glared at her silently. Ignoring my look, she smirked and began to reveal her true intentions. "Actually, he's about to build a new hospital," she said proudly, looking at Dylan, whose expression remained stern. "What?" "Actually, we're thinking of moving in here as well." "Why would that be?" "We've decided to build a new hospital around this area. There's spare land and not many hospitals around, right? So we plan to use this house as a base to commute to the hospital. That's why we need you to move out. But you can't just spring this on me all of a sudden. I know this house is in your name, but you should leave for Mom and Dad's sake. Just give the house to me." "Why do you get to decide that all on your own?" "Of course, both Dad and Mom agree with me. They truly want you out as well." I remembered that Grandpa had transferred the house into my name before he passed away. At the time, I didn't understand his true intentions, but now it seemed clear. The real head of this house is Dad. Titles don't matter, so just leave quietly. "No, this house is filled with memories of Grandma and Grandpa. Stop being so childish. You're just a parasite living here, bothering everyone. It's time for you to leave," Michelle shouted as if delivering a final blow. "Angela, don't you think you're a bad influence on your nephew?" I turned my eyes towards my mother as she said this. "You think your nephew is cute, right? Do you really want him to see you living like a parasite, dependent on your parents? For his education, you should leave." During this, my father kept his gaze down, fiddling with his phone. Dylan remained silent, but his attentive listening suggested he agreed. At that moment, I thought to myself, let them think what they will. Nothing I said would matter to them, and I wanted to escape from this toxic environment as soon as possible. "Fine, do whatever you like," I said, and stormed up to my room. I was furious about everything but decided to think calmly about what to do next. That night, I made a decision. The next morning, I went downstairs to find Michelle's family gone. My parents seemed to be asleep, and the leftover mess from the previous night remained untouched. I took my laptop and headed to a nearby cafe. Soon, my phone was bombarded with calls and emails from my mother, demanding to know where I was and to come back and make their breakfast, but I ignored them all and proceeded with my plan. Using my laptop, I first searched for moving companies and contacted one as soon as their office opened. Thankfully, since it was off-peak season, they could come on the same day. I timed my return to the house when I knew my parents would be at work. The house was a mess after just a few hours without me, and I sighed deeply in frustration. Shortly after, the movers arrived with a large truck. "Which items are we taking?" "Everything in the house." The movers efficiently packed up everything I had purchased, from large appliances like the washing machine, vacuum cleaner, fridge, and microwave, to smaller items like dishes. It was lively when I had all the latest electronic appliances, but after everything was moved out, the house felt empty and somewhat sad. Legally, this was still my house, but I no longer wanted to be there. However, I vowed not to waste my grandparents' intentions. As I left the house filled with my grandparents' memories, I felt oddly liberated. That evening, my phone rang. It was my mother. "What the hell is going on?" "All the appliances are gone, did you take them?" "Of course I did. You wanted me out, so I'm leaving, but naturally I'm taking what I bought." "I'm glad you're leaving, but taking the appliances is not right." "Why not?" "They're mine, I bought them." "You bought them with Grandpa's money." "No, how many times do I have to tell you? The money from Grandpa is very important to me, I wouldn't touch it. I bought everything with my own money." I sent her a photo of my bank book showing today's date to prove it. I had just withdrawn $100, so the balance should make it clear. "You're horrible to do this to your own parents." "Fine, we don't need your appliances, we'll ask Michelle and her family to help." "I don't care. But you guys need to leave quickly. That house is in my name." "What?" "Don't be ridiculous." That was the last I heard from my mother. Inwardly, I hoped Dylan could successfully buy the house, not just the appliances. A few days later, Michelle contacted me sooner than expected. "Angela? I hope you've calmed down by now. Can we talk just one more time, please?" Her tone was different, as if she was treading carefully. "What do you want?" "I'm busy with work. Make it quick. I've been thinking since then. It was our mistake to try to kick you out. We're family, shouldn't we live together? After calling me a parasite, now you suddenly talk about family? Absolutely not. You guys have moved in already, haven't you?" "We moved in yesterday, but there have been some complications." "Oh, about Dylan? He got fired from the hospital, right?" "I know, though it's amazing you kept quiet about it." "How do you know that?" "I'm not as clueless as you think. A friend of mine works in admin at the hospital Dylan was at. She told me he was fired for having an affair. It turns out that Dylan had an affair with a nurse and got her pregnant. He tried to convince the woman not to have the child in an attempt to keep the affair hidden, but the enraged woman exposed the truth throughout the hospital. Fearing the hospital's reputation would suffer, Dylan's father decided to fire him. Dylan couldn't tell Michelle the truth and fabricated a story about building a new hospital to secure a place to live. Actually, I just found out about it recently and was shocked. Now he has no money and is being sued for compensation by the woman's husband. Plus, Dad has left home. What happened to Dad? According to Michelle, it seems that my father also had an affair and left a note and divorce papers before moving out, just before Michelle and her family were to move in. Apparently, he had written complaints about my mother in the note, and after reading it, my mother became bedridden. You can't just leave us in such a sorry state, right? Angela, you'll help us, won't you? You still have the money Grandpa gave you, right? What are you saying now? Mom showed me the photo of the bank book. I believe you're working now. After all this time of not believing I could support myself with my earnings, it's ironic they turn to me only when it suits them. Don't just rely on me when it's convenient. I'm not coming back. I've tolerated everything because the house was filled with memories of Grandma and Grandpa. But I've realized that those memories will always be in my heart. Wait, please. I have no good memories with Dad, Mom, or you, so asking for my help now only troubles me. Oh, and make sure you move out soon. That house is in my name. Yes, I had been enduring all along. Saying all this out loud made my heart feel lighter, and I was convinced that I could now find happiness. Please, Angela, you're going to abandon your family like this. After that, I didn't respond to any calls or messages from my mother or Michelle. For the first 3 months, they contacted me persistently, but they seem to have given up now, and my days are peaceful. I heard that the couple opened a hospital with borrowed money, but it attracts no patients, likely because Dylan's affair partner has spread bad rumors. My mother developed depression from the shock of my father leaving and is currently hospitalized. When I decided to move out of that house, I also resolved to sell it, and I went through with it. Seeing the notice of sale, Michelle and her family had no choice but to move to a nearby apartment. Burdened with debt and with no patience, there's not much they can do. It's none of my concern anymore. However, I do hope my nephew finds happiness, as he is innocent in all this. As for me, my work is going well, and I'm expanding my business. Grateful to my grandparents, I hope to one day find a home where I truly belong. I am determined to keep living my life to the fullest. You, a failure who could only get into a lower-tier agricultural school, should get out immediately. My father declared that loudly to me, who had decided to attend an agricultural high school, and my mother added harsh words, banishing me from our family home. It's a disgrace for you to attend an agricultural high school. For a long time, I haven't met my parents who said this to me. One day, I encountered an unexpected situation and was unable to do anything about it. My parents and sister, who value superficial evaluations, were living an unexpected life. My name is Florine, and I am currently 28 years old. Currently, I work for an agricultural corporation run by my husband. It started as a small farm operated by my husband's family, but after he took over, we expanded the business and incorporated it 3 years ago when we got married. We grow some rice, but we mainly focus on vegetables like tomatoes and cucumbers grown in greenhouses, and we employ many workers. After graduating from agricultural high school, I worked at a supermarket's vegetable section but soon clicked with my husband, who was delivering vegetables, and eventually started working at his farm. Initially, I was not interested in romance, but as we worked together, I was attracted to his sincerity and accepted his proposal to marry. Let's incorporate the farm when we get married. He suggested that to me, and I agreed, so he became the representative, and I worked as the sales manager. I originally enjoyed vegetable gardening, but my husband requested, "I don't know much about sales, so can you handle that, Florine? I'd like you to utilize your working experience at the supermarket." Since my childhood, I loved plants and dreamed of working in agriculture, but my parents, both civil servants, did not understand this. Both my parents valued social status highly and strongly opposed me, a woman, living as a farmer. Growing up with parents who tended to disregard professions other than civil service, my father had always been saying, "Become a proper civil servant and take care of us in the future." He seemed to want me to pursue that career for a stable civil service income and to take care of them in the future. Also, my mother was always saying, "With a civil service job, you'll get a good pension, so you can rest easy after retirement." Despite such expectations from my parents, I chose to lead the life I wanted, and I had no intention of becoming a civil servant. On a school visitation day in elementary school, when I announced my dream of becoming a farmer, I received severe scolding from my mother that day. "Why would you say something so embarrassing? You should become a civil servant." My father also scolded me upon hearing this. "Don't publicly declare that you want to be a farmer anymore." I couldn't understand the reason for my parents' anger, and they wouldn't give a clear answer when I pressed them, but they were adamant about their child becoming a civil servant. I have a younger sister, 2 years younger than me, who always understood how to please our parents by watching me get scolded. Unlike Florine, I will definitely become a civil servant, so don't worry. Because I was rebellious, my parents doted on my sister, who aimed to be a civil servant, gave her anything she wanted, never made her wear my hand-me-downs, and often bought new clothes for her instead of me. In middle school, I had good grades, but even when her grades were poor, my sister was praised by our parents. It's okay if your school grades are low as long as you score high on the civil service exam. When my father said this, my mother criticized me, who had good grades. No matter how good your grades are, we don't need a child like you who doesn't listen to her parents. So, during high school applications, I chose my school based on my own will and selected an agricultural high school despite having the grades to go elsewhere, which led my parents to start screaming. "You, a failure who could only get into a lower-tier agricultural school, should get out immediately. My father commanded me to leave, and my mother agreed as she yelled, "It's a disgrace for you to attend an agricultural high school." When I was in trouble, I sought help from my paternal grandfather, who offered to take care of me at his home until I graduated high school. My grandfather was estranged from my father and always acted as my guardian. At that time, my grandfather stood by me and told my father he would take care of me. He paid for everything, including my tuition, for which I was grateful, but this completely estranged me from my father, and I felt guilty about it. After graduating high school, I worked at a supermarket while gradually repaying my grandfather for the tuition. He said it was not necessary, but the support I received during my 3 years of high school went beyond just tuition, so I felt I should repay him more. As my salary increases, I intend to properly repay you, Grandpa. He was pleased with my attitude. While commuting to high school from his house, I had no contact with my family or sister. I disliked initiating contact after leaving home, and it seemed my father had no interest in speaking with his own father, with whom he was estranged. It seemed my mother had placed her hopes more on my sister. However, with my grandfather and school friends around, I never felt lonely. When I finally got a job after graduating high school, I visited my parents' house for the first time in a long while to report my new status. However, upon returning home, my father greeted me with harsh words. "I do not acknowledge someone who ignores their parents' advice as my child. Why have you come back?" My mother, learning that I was working at a supermarket, took a disdainful attitude. "Since you couldn't become a civil servant, I suppose a supermarket job suits you just fine." Disappointed by my parents' still prevalent emphasis on civil service, I immediately went back to my grandfather's house. From that day, I decided to cut off all contact with my family. While working at the supermarket's vegetable section, a local farmer used to deliver vegetables directly. This farmer would later become my spouse. "Good morning. I'm delivering fresh vegetables today." "Hello and thank you. Your vegetables are indeed fresh and very sweet. What's your secret?" Through such exchanges, we quickly clicked. Inspired by his stories, I decided to try agriculture myself and left the supermarket to work at his farm. We became good partners at work, and eventually we became indispensable to each other. Our decision to get married came naturally. Before getting married, I had informed my husband about my family situation, and he showed a lot of understanding. We did not send invitations to my parents and sister. After all, the chances of them attending were slim. The wedding was a small but warm reception attended only by friends, my in-laws, and my grandfather. Grandpa liked my husband and enjoyed conversing with him. "I'm really glad you married a good person. Now I can rest easy." As he always supported me, seeing him happy made me feel truly joyful. With our marriage, my husband's farm was registered as a corporation. Having previously handled accounting at the supermarket, I took over the financial management, which my husband found challenging. Alongside managing the incorporated farm, we occasionally visit my grandfather to check on him. After a while, as he was living alone, it seemed that he had become frail, which worried us. "It's so much fun to have someone to talk to when you're back home." He had casually mentioned this when we were living together before. "He appears lively when we visit, but he might feel lonely when he is alone." After I started working post-high school, my grandfather was living by himself again. I had always been concerned about him living alone, and my husband seemed worried too. "Why don't we invite your grandfather to live with us? Living alone might become difficult for him, and we have a spare room that would be just perfect," my husband suggested. Our house was spacious enough for him to live comfortably. My parents-in-law lived with my husband's sister and her husband, so we didn't need to take care of them. Therefore, we suggested living together to my grandfather. "Grandpa, why don't you live with us?" "It must be lonely living alone," I asked. He was concerned about imposing on my husband, but after my husband personally reassured him, he agreed to move in. I was pondering whether to inform my father about our plans to live with Grandpa when Grandpa said, "Keep this matter a secret." My father, despite being his only son, had no intention of taking care of Grandpa, who also did not desire my father's help. Thus, I decided to take care of Grandpa myself. That way, there shouldn't be any complaints from my father. 3 years had passed since Grandpa started living with us after our marriage. 10 years have passed since I graduated from high school, and my sister should have already started working by then. My sister is 2 years younger than me, but just as I didn't tell her about my marriage, she might be married as well. One day, I went to a client's supermarket and was negotiating with the person in charge of the vegetable section. Previously a privately owned farm, my husband has since focused on training new staff and actively engaging in farming activities since we incorporated the farm. Currently, I handle the administrative and sales tasks, and after discussing the delivery details, suddenly someone called out from behind. "Hey, is that you, Florine? What, are you working at this supermarket now?" Turning around, I was greeted with a sarcastic smile from my sister, whom I hadn't seen in 10 years. She looked significantly older than I remembered, and I couldn't hide my surprise. Behind her, my parents were watching us with an unpleasant smirk, and their aged appearance made me painfully aware of the long time we had not met. Florine can only work at a supermarket even until now. How pathetic. My father's words visibly angered the supermarket employees around us. I tried to stop my rude father, but my mother continued to speak. "I wish I had never given birth to a daughter who works in such a place," she said with a sigh during our first reunion in years. The supermarket employees were quite irritated, but probably wanting to avoid a nasty complaint, they left the scene. I sent a cold glance to the 3 of them and countered with deliberately polite words. "If you despise supermarkets so much, why come here? Why not go to a more prestigious department store?" As noisy as ever. Moreover, whatever misunderstanding you may have, I am not an employee of this store. My reply flustered my father, who whispered a question. What did you say? Stop talking in such a confusing way." "So, what are you doing then?" Regardless, I understood that they would continue to look down on me, and it was clear they would not visit our home, so I honestly told them that I work for the agricultural corporation run by my husband. When I revealed that I work for an agricultural corporation, the 3 of them started laughing as they pleased. It was very loud, enough to make other customers turn around. "Your sister has become a civil servant, but you, her older sister, are working for an agricultural corporation, just that, huh?" My father said that contentedly, and my sister continued while laughing. "It suits you perfectly, doesn't it, Florine? You must really love farming." After their laughter subsided, the 3 of them left as if nothing had happened. I apologized to the person in charge, who was waiting at the back for the disturbance caused by my family. The person in charge understood that it wasn't my fault and was upset about my parents' rudeness. It turns out my parents often visit this supermarket, and the person in charge remembered them well. When I ran into my parents and sister after a long time, they still held the same prejudices, and I felt embarrassed by their attitude. I hadn't told my parents about us living with Grandpa, but when I got home and told my husband and Grandpa about the incident at the supermarket, they were surprised and burst into laughter. Divine punishment will come for them someday if they keep this up. After Grandpa said that, my husband added, "Really though, do they have some grudge against farmers? It's laughable to think that they criticize the vegetables we grow while eating them." Afterwards, I started conducting negotiations at the supermarket through the back door in secret. A month later, during a negotiation with the person in charge at the supermarket, the store was noisy, so I asked what was happening. "Is there a problem?" The staff members seemed to be very busy. Curious, the person in charge hurried back to the sales floor. A short while later they returned, trying to suppress their laughter, and said, "Actually, your parents were caught shoplifting. Could you come to the office for a moment?" Bewildered by the sudden news, I followed the person in charge to the office. As I stepped into the office, I was shocked to see my parents and sister, who couldn't move and were staring at the floor. When my sister saw me, she stood up and began shouting, "Hey, Florine, help. I shoplifted, but it was just the spur of the moment." As soon as she said that, the supermarket manager became furious. "Stop lying. I know you've been shoplifting habitually. It's all caught on the security cameras." Indeed, the security camera footage clearly recorded my father handling the products and my mother and sister concealing them in their bags and pockets. Given my parents' past behavior, I was perplexed by this situation, as I had wanted to avoid any involvement with them. Suddenly, my father pointed at the store manager and yelled loudly, "Don't think you can arrest us civil servants." The store manager, infuriated by my father's baseless arrogance, immediately called the police. My father showed a face full of regret, but it was too late. The police arrived and took all three away. The person in charge of the vegetable section, who had witnessed the entire scene, appeared satisfied, and the store manager finally seemed to calm down from his anger. Later, the store manager informed me about the details of the products my parents had shoplifted. The stolen items included food like pasta and bread. Additionally, several tomatoes and cucumbers grown at our farm had been taken. On the way home, feeling uncomfortable, I told my husband and grandfather about my parents being arrested for shoplifting. Both were unable to hide their surprise, and Grandpa looked particularly disappointed. Even though their relationship wasn't good, the arrest of his son and granddaughter was a shock, and he remained silent thereafter. Meanwhile, my husband expressed his concern. Why would they do such a thing? They're employed, so they shouldn't be financially struggling, right? I also didn't know the recent circumstances of my parents, but assumed that, being civil servants, they should be financially stable. It was clear that if civil servants were caught shoplifting, it would quickly spread through media and social media, becoming a major issue. The next day, concerned, I visited the supermarket again, where I learned from the store manager that the three had already been released. It was their first arrest, but since the security cameras also captured evidence of other days' shoplifting, it was highly likely they would be charged. After returning home, I received a call from my sister. "I need to ask you something. Can you give me your home address?" It was unusual for her to ask so urgently, and thinking she might be encountering a serious issue, I gave her the address. Shortly after, my sister arrived at our house with our parents. As soon as my sister stepped into the entrance, she pleaded, "Florine, please pay for my settlement money." As I was stunned by my sister's dejected appearance in front of me, my parents began apologizing one after another and asked for financial assistance. Seeing them, who had always looked down on others, in such a situation left me half in disbelief. At that moment, sensing the commotion, Grandpa appeared and loudly scolded all three of them. "Adults committing theft, have you no shame? As civil servants, you've acted high and mighty, and now this pitiful display." My parents were taken aback by his unexpected stance, feeling embarrassed and remorseful. Soon after, my husband arrived. Recalling that my husband managed the agricultural corporation, my father quickly began demanding money. "You're the president. You must not be short on money, right? Please, pay the settlement money." I was shocked by my father's attitude, asking for money from my husband, whom he was meeting for the first time. Grandpa, present at the scene, openly showed his anger at my father's words and rebuked him sternly. "What you are saying is ridiculous. Stop such foolish talk right now. I will pay the settlement money, but first, let's hear exactly what happened." Encouraged by his firm proposal, my father momentarily showed relief, but then hesitated to discuss the details. However, under Grandpa's stern gaze, my father finally began to explain the full story. My sister had previously claimed to be a civil servant, but in reality, she was working in a non-regular job, constantly facing unstable income and uncertainty about contract renewals. 3 years ago, her contract ended, and since then, she hadn't taken any other part-time jobs, focusing on studying for the civil service exam at a specialized school. "Wait, does that mean you're currently unemployed?" I asked. "Yes, that's right," my sister responded with a wry smile. This was not a situation to laugh about, and indeed, it was not laughable at all. Then, my father made an even more shocking confession. "Actually, I said those things before to make a good impression on you, but the truth is, neither your sister nor your mother has been working," he revealed. "Wait, Mom has been unemployed too?" I asked, surprised. "Yes, she thought there was no need to work," my father answered. My mother had believed that my sister had secured a stable job, so she retired as soon as my sister got a job. However, when she later found out that my sister was actually in a precarious employment situation, the truth had a profound impact on her, leaving her visibly pale. As my father had not secured a high position at work, the family's financial situation was becoming increasingly dire each day. Particularly, the tuition for the vocational school my sister attended was exorbitantly high, and my father's income alone couldn't cover it, forcing the family to deplete their savings to maintain daily expenses. My parents had renovated the house and bought a new car in hopes of a successful job outcome for my sister, but the associated loan repayments became a significant burden for my father. As my sister lost her job and my mother retired simultaneously, the family's income rapidly decreased. Moreover, my parents were very concerned about maintaining appearances and refused to lower their standard of living. To keep up appearances, they were forced into increasingly dire financial straits. This family, with its high self-esteem, continued to refuse financial assistance from me or Grandpa. As a result, the mounting economic pressure led them to engage in the illegal act of shoplifting, culminating in their arrest. When the shoplifting was discovered at work, my father was suspended, and shocked by this, he resigned immediately. Previously arrogant, he could no longer withstand the harsh scrutiny from his colleagues. Faced with reality, my sister applied to many companies, but after dozens of rejections, she was hired by a company known for its grueling conditions of further trial for her. Struggling to balance living expenses and loan repayments, my parents were finally ordered by Grandpa to work on the farm managed by my husband. Grandpa, addressing my husband, who is the farm manager, said, "I'm not sure how much they'll be able to contribute, but make sure they are put to good use." The impact of this new working environment on my parents is still unknown. I got it. You will receive the necessary training for this work before starting. My husband informed my parents. They worked under my husband's supervision, receiving strict guidance from employees of my generation, and frequently voiced the hardships of their work. Under the pressure of debt, and with no other choice, my parents continued to labor, enduring physical pain but working desperately. For years, my father had harbored hopes for Grandpa's inheritance, but Grandpa definitively cut off those expectations. "After all these years of no contact, what are you saying now? I will leave all my inheritance to Florine. The settlement money I paid for you should be enough," Grandpa stated firmly. My father's hope had been to clear their debts with Grandpa's inheritance, but that plan would never be realized. Today, it is not uncommon for people to live to 100, and there is no doubt that my energetic grandfather will continue to live a long life. I have some happy news to share. Recently, it has become clear that I am pregnant. I've shared this joy with my grandfather, and I sincerely hope he lives as long as possible to spend much time with my child who is soon to be born. Grandpa used to live alone, but since starting to live with us, his health has noticeably improved, and he has become actively involved in the daily operations of the farm. He is looking forward to the birth of his grandchild and will surely shower him with love. My husband has renewed his determination, saying, "For the new life that is about to be born, we must strive even harder." Thanks to his dedicated efforts, the farm's performance has been steadily improving, and our lives are becoming more fulfilling. I, too, am focusing on my work in the office while preparing for childbirth, carrying my growing belly every day. During this happy time, I am doing everything I can to bring a healthy, lively baby into the world and continue to make my husband and grandfather happy. How foolish you are. No matter how much fish you eat, your lack of intelligence will never improve. Stop saying unnecessary things and just focus on studying. You're the only failure in this house. Why are you so stupid? These were the harsh words my mother would constantly say to me since childhood. The way my mother treated me was clearly different from how she treated my sister. My grandmother, who felt sorry for me and was skilled in cooking, took me in. By eating the meals she prepared daily, an unexpected change occurred in me. My mother began to regret leaving me in my grandmother's care. My name is Caroline, and I'm a third-year student at a public high school. I'm not particularly good at studying, but I enjoy school life. My family consists of my parents and my talented younger sister, Julia. She excels in her studies, always ranking in the top 5 of her class, and is aiming to enter medical school. She has a slim and cute appearance, almost like an idol. On the other hand, I'm not good at academics. I'm chubby, have rough skin, and my appearance is far from idol-like. My mother always treated me harshly, constantly saying, "Your grades are really terrible. It's a waste to spend money on you, so make sure you go to a public high school." Since I was bad at studying, I ended up attending a low-level public high school that anyone could get into. My mother would often say, "Where does such stupidity come from?" Even I sometimes find it strange. Both my father and mother were outstanding students, and after graduating from prestigious universities, they met while working at a top company and eventually got married. My sister resembles them and is also very talented. According to my mother, I'm the only one who doesn't fit in with this family, a failure. Since I was a child, it was clear that my mother doted on my sister. Normally, older siblings pass down their clothes and toys to younger ones. However, in my case, I was always given cheap items from secondhand stores or hand-me-downs from others. In contrast, my sister was always dressed in brand new, beautiful clothes and played with the latest toys. While I envied her, my fear of being disliked by my mother kept me silent. My sister and I have completely different personalities and interests. I enjoyed being active outdoors, often getting injured or covered in mud, and getting scolded for it. In contrast, my sister Julia preferred the traditional way girls play, engaging in make-believe kitchens and doll playing. Julia, you are really ladylike and cute. You're completely different from Caroline. Don't become a barbarian like her, okay? My mother would often say to her in a gentle voice. I was deeply hurt by these words many times, but I had become accustomed to her cold attitude and sarcasm. Julia was very loved and pampered by our mother, receiving sweet cakes and candies from an early age. I was never given such treats. Once I asked Julia if I could have some, but she refused, saying, "No, Mom said you shouldn't eat sweets because you're not smart." Perhaps because she was raised this way by our mother, Julia was also cold towards me, and would sometimes say things that ridiculed me. At home, only my father was on my side, but he was not reliable as he did not defend me and never spoke up against my mother. However, my father never spoke ill of me and was always kind to me, so I trusted no one else but him. Looking back at my childhood, it wouldn't have been a surprise if I became rebellious and turned to delinquency, but surprisingly, I grew up to be quite bright and healthy. I had many friends. Although I was not good at studying, my school life was always enjoyable. In fact, school was more comfortable for me than home. The reason I grew up this way was perhaps largely due to the influence of my paternal grandmother, who lived nearby. My mother often told me to go to my grandmother's house to play. Now, I realized that my mother wanted to go out with Julia without me, considering me a nuisance. I deeply loved my grandparents' house. Welcome, Caroline. Today I baked a special cake. Let's enjoy it together. My grandmother always treated me warmly. She would offer homemade delicious snacks and cared about my worn clothes, gifting me hand-knitted sweaters. "Caroline, isn't your mom buying you new clothes for those worn-out ones?" she would ask. I was speechless. My grandmother didn't say anything more, but she treated me with kindness and compassion. The relationship between my grandmother and mother had never been good. Although they hardly ever saw each other, I heard about the situation from my father. Originally, they had planned to live together, but my mother unilaterally refused to accept help with household chores and child rearing. "We were supposed to live together. But your mother refused. It's not like she does any housework or parenting properly. Caroline, you're always welcome to come to Grandma's house." I truly loved my grandmother. One day in my 3rd year of middle school, as usual, I visited her house. Seeing that I had gained weight over the years and my skin condition had worsened, my grandmother expressed her concern. "Caroline, what do you usually eat? There are foods that are good for your skin. Maybe you could ask your mom to cook those." My mother rarely cooked and mainly provided me with cheap donuts for economic reasons. Eating donuts every day led to weight gain and skin problems. I couldn't control my hunger, and I would be scolded if I tried to use the fridge on my own. This was the state of my eating habits. In contrast, my sister was slim and had clean skin. My mother considered Julia's health and bought her expensive salads and side dishes when eating out. I felt discriminated against even in terms of meals, and during family meals I wanted to return to my room quickly, hastily swallowing the donuts. In the first autumn after I entered high school, my grandmother made an unusual visit. "A relative gave us a lot of mackerel. We can't eat it all, so I want you all to have some. Mackerel is good for your health." She said this, bringing a lot of fatty, fresh mackerel. However, my mother reacted with annoyance. "Mother-in-law, this is troublesome. We don't accept fish in our house. Even if we receive so much, it will just end up being thrown away. In fact, I don't hate fish. We never had fish at home simply because my mother didn't cook." "Is that so? You're not fond of fish? It's too bad. Fish is good for both the body and the brain." My grandmother was disappointed. It was painful to see my beloved grandmother so disappointed, and I couldn't help but blurt out, "Actually, I like fish. I want to eat it." As soon as the words left my mouth, it was clear that my mother's sharp gaze was piercing me. "How foolish. Your lack of intelligence will not improve no matter how much fish you eat. Stop saying unnecessary things and focus on studying. You are the only failure in this house. Why are you so foolish?" My mother continued her tirade. My grandmother, visibly angry, said, "Excuse me, Tracy. Is this how you always treat Caroline? Do not interfere, mother-in-law. I am struggling because this child is a failure. I think she probably has some developmental disorder." Though I thought I was used to my mother's sarcasm, being called developmentally disabled still hurt. Grandmother grew even more indignant and said, "She's my dear granddaughter. How can I be irrelevant? How can you be so heartless toward your own daughter? Stop preaching to me. We don't even live together. I didn't have this child because I wanted to." Grandmother's anger reached a peak, and she was trembling. "That's enough. You don't deserve to be a mother. I cannot leave Caroline with you. Caroline, you are going to live with me." This incident led me to decide to live with my grandmother. I went straight to my grandmother's house, and later my father brought my belongings. With a sad expression, he stroked my hair and apologized. I'm sorry that things have turned out this way, making you sad." I didn't blame my father, but he clearly felt guilty. Considering my mother's personality, any admonition from him might have led to a backlash, affecting me. I feel it was destined for things to end up this way. Your father is really kind, but he's just too timid. He loves you very much, and today he tearfully asked me to take good care of you. His wife is self-centered and stubborn. I really don't know why he married her. I just listened silently to what Grandma said about him. And thus began my new life with Grandma. Grandma wakes up early every day, getting up at 5 a.m., to prepare breakfast for me and Grandpa. I was amazed at how lavish the breakfast she made were. "Grandma, this is incredible. Thank you for such an amazing breakfast. It must have been a lot of work for you." Her breakfasts always featured a variety of items, with an extensive menu. That morning's breakfast included a rich vegetable soup made from chicken and vegetable stock, scrambled eggs, and a salad with nuts. I was worried if I could eat so much, but it was more delicious than I imagined, and the more I ate, the hungrier I seemed to get, quickly finishing everything. "Grandma, this is amazing. I've never had anything this delicious before." Surprised by my reaction, Grandma asked, "Do you really think it's that special? What do you usually eat at home?" "I usually don't have breakfast. It's not prepared. If I feel like it, I might toast some bread myself. Mostly, I just eat donuts." Grandma sighed at my response and said, "Really? That mother of yours? Breakfast is the source of energy for the day, especially important during the growth phase. Eat plenty now, and make sure to go to school well prepared." With that, she served me a generous helping of soup. Every school day, Grandma prepared a lunchbox for me. My friends were also amazed by the lunchbox packed with homemade side dishes, colorful and lavish, exclaiming, "What an incredible lunchbox." When I was with my mother, I never had a lunchbox and always ate almost expired bread. A deli lunchbox was a normal meal for me, and I had never eaten anything homemade by my family, so this change was very welcome. The dinners Grandma made were also exceptional, featuring whole grain bread and soups full of ingredients. The main dishes often included fish and sometimes meat, offering a varied menu that never got boring. Since I started living with Grandma, I frequently enjoyed ingredients I had never tried before, like quinoa and kale. "Grandma, your cooking is truly top-notch. I'm so happy to try so many types of food." Every time I expressed my amazement at the meals, Grandma smiled happily. "This is normal for me. It's just that she doesn't cook properly. I wonder what they are eating now." While talking, Grandma expressed her concern for the well-being of my father and sister Julia. "Living with my grandparents has been rejuvenating for me, and they have always been warm. After meals, when I share stories from school, they always encourage me. For me, who was always criticized and treated coldly, this home felt incredibly comfortable and utterly stress-free. I realized that a home should naturally be such a comfortable place. Surprisingly, my academic performance improved significantly. Though it's often said that my school is low-level, my grades jumped to above average. When I told Grandma about this progress, she was very pleased. "Grandma, my grades have improved a lot. I think I've become smarter. See, I've been making food that's good for the brain every day. It has paid off." That evening, Grandma celebrated happily and specially prepared a pumpkin pie, using a whole fresh pumpkin. While I was having another slice of pumpkin pie, I asked, "Can you tell me about the brain-boosting foods you mentioned earlier?" "I'm not completely sure myself, but there are many ingredients that are said to be good for the brain, like oily fish, nuts, spinach, and avocados. I try to incorporate them in a balanced way." The meals Grandma prepared indeed had evenly distributed nutrition, utilizing these ingredients. "Grandma, you've been cooking with so much care for me." "Not at all. Grandpa and I are also getting older, so we started this for our own dementia prevention as well. Seeing your grades improve really shows that our efforts have paid off." Grandma and Grandpa are indeed over 70 years old, but they are still vibrant and show no signs of dementia. What we eat makes our body. That's why, just by incorporating balanced and seasonal ingredients, we can live healthily every day. Since I started living with my grandparents, my physical health has clearly improved. I started being able to wake up early easily, and I am full of energy. My skin condition has also gotten better, and I realized it's thanks to Grandma's cooking. Thinking back to my diet when I lived with my mother, I was shocked at its poor quality. What kind of meals did your mom usually make? At home, meals were mostly store-bought bread and donuts, and Dad and Julia mainly ate ready-made side dishes from delis and sometimes instant noodles. I really can't understand that wife. How can she allow such a diet when there are growing children at home? Expressing this, Grandma sighed with disappointment. After a while, I decided to go back home for the first time in a long time with my report card in hand. I was nervous, but I hoped that Mom would be pleased, so I gathered my courage and went home. When I met my mother and sister Julia after 6 months, Julia exclaimed in surprise, "Hey sis, when did you become so pretty?" What happened? Did you change something?" Julia has always been sensitive to beauty. In fact, I too feel that my appearance has improved. Since living with Grandma, I have lost weight and become slimmer than before. My facial acne, which was once plentiful, has completely disappeared, and I also changed my hairstyle at a beauty salon I visited with Grandma. Previously, Mom cut my hair at home to save costs, so the change now is clear. Then Mom appeared, so I immediately showed her my report card. "Mom, look, I think I've become a bit smarter." However, Mom didn't acknowledge my achievements and dismissed them. "Why are you boasting? You just got decent grades at a low-level school. Nothing has changed." I felt foolish for having hoped for her approval. Mom returned my words coldly and expressionlessly. Yes, this was typical of her. During this conversation, Julia kept asking, "Why have you become so pretty? Tell me." I'm jealous. While Julia is naturally beautiful, she is also a curious girl in her growth phase, and she was very interested in my changes. There was never such a conversation when we lived together before, and although I was happy to talk like this, Mom's response was cold. "Hey, how long are you staying? Julia has an important exam coming up. I don't want your stupidity rubbing off on her, so go back soon." With those words, she refused to take my report card. "You don't have to say it like that." As I headed home, tears began to flow uncontrollably. Having had my hopes up, the cold treatment left me deeply disappointed, and I felt painfully out of place within my own family. I couldn't understand why this was happening. When I returned home, Grandma immediately embraced me, and we cried together. "Oh, what have they done?" I sobbed uncontrollably in Grandma's comforting embrace. After a while, Grandma began to speak calmly. "I originally planned to keep this a secret until you were 20, but I've decided now is the time to tell you. Please listen carefully." I didn't understand what she was about to reveal, but her serious expression made me brace myself. "Caroline, the people you always thought were your parents are not your real parents." "What do you mean?" "Actually, your real parents were very close friends of your supposed father." As I struggled to grasp what she was saying, Grandma continued with the details. "Your biological parents were in an accident before you were born. Your father died, and your mother was barely saved but in a very critical condition. She managed to have you delivered by cesarean section, wanting you to be saved at all costs. At that time, the man you know as your father rushed to her side. With her last wish, she entrusted him with your care, and he vowed to make you happy. Is that really true?" I was overwhelmed by the sudden revelation and doubted its authenticity. "It's true. You look very much like them," Grandma went on. "When the decision was made to adopt you, Tracy strongly opposed it. She said she could never accept a child that wasn't hers. She even suspected that you might be the result of an affair by your father, but that's impossible. Your father isn't capable of such deceit. In fact, you resemble your real parents who have passed away. Here I have a photo as proof." With that, Grandma pulled out an old album. The album contained a photo of my young father and his best friend from their high school days. The image was old and the features hard to distinguish, but I felt a resemblance to myself. "This is your real father and mother." After hearing the explanation, I began to understand why my mother's attitude toward me was so cold. Perhaps it was because I was not her biological child and had joined the family unwillingly. Learning this significant truth filled my heart with various emotions, and I was tormented by a complex sense of loss. Actually, Caroline, your real parents were very much looking forward to your coming into this world. They had even decided on your name before you were born. The name Caroline is proof that you were deeply loved." Tears naturally started flowing uncontrollably. "I've always felt so troubled, regretting my very existence," I confessed. "Caroline, I'm truly sorry for all the pain you've endured. You are a cherished and wanted child in this family," Grandma said, as she hugged me tightly, tears streaming down her face. Having always sought my mother's love and lived to please her, I now felt that I no longer needed to do so, and my heart felt slightly lighter. The next day, my father visited Grandma's house. "I'm really sorry for keeping the truth hidden for so long," he apologized. He then showed me photos of my birth parents on his smartphone. My birth father looked intelligent, and my birth mother had a warm, beautiful smile in the photos. "Can you send these to my phone?" I asked. Of course, Dad agreed, and he shared many memories of my real parents. "I vowed to make you happy when I decided to adopt you, but I ended up causing you so much trouble. I'm sorry for being an inadequate father," he repeatedly apologized. I continued to live peacefully at Grandma's house, graduated from high school without going to university, and got a job in video editing locally. A happy report came from Dad after my sister Julia's university entrance exams. She was accepted into her first-choice medical school. According to Dad, Julia's reaction to her mother changed after the day I visited home with my report card. As she grew up, Julia began to question my mother's attitude towards me and her abandonment of household duties. Mother, once devotedly loved by Julia, was distanced by her and became withdrawn and isolated. "Julia must be having a hard time living with Mom in such a situation. Let's invite her over for dinner next time," Grandma suggested. 4 days after making that promise, Dad brought Julia to our house for dinner. "Julia, congratulations on getting into medical school," I congratulated her. "Thank you, I'm so happy." "Huh. Sis, did you get even cuter?" Julia responded. Our conversation became even more lively than before. "Really? Actually, losing weight, my clearer skin, and my changed mindset are all thanks to Grandma," I explained. What happened? Julia was surprised. However, once she saw the dinner Grandma had prepared, she quickly understood. "Grandma, this is amazing. The omega-3 fatty acids from the fish, antioxidants from the vegetables, and nutrients from the whole grains are perfect. I can see why you've changed." Julia was impressed. "You're really in medical school, aren't you? That's impressive. Don't you think it's amazing?" With that, we laughed together as sisters. Julia had once adopted a condescending attitude towards me, influenced by our mother, but now that influence seemed to have faded, we could enjoy having a normal conversation. How happy it was for us to be able to laugh together so naturally. During dinner, the doorbell rang. Grandma opened the front door, and Mom burst in angrily, saying, "What are you doing?" "Just having dinner," was the reply. "Why do I have to be alone at home?" Mom was emotionally pleading. "I called you, but you didn't come out, so I left a note on the table." "Did you do that on purpose because I'm too sick to cook?" "Everyone is being mean to me." "Mom, I don't remember you ever cooking." "Who is being mean?" "Really?" Julia sharply retorted. Mom fell silent, then stared at me and said, "Ever since Caroline came back, our family has been strange. Julia becoming rebellious is your fault. Even though her successful exam is thanks to my upbringing, there's not a single thank you from her. It's all your fault." "Mom, it's not Sis's fault. I hated how you bullied her and overprotected me all the time. No matter how much I studied, you never made us good food, so I never felt like you were really trying," Julia said, as she enjoyed the delicious meal Grandma had prepared. "Why don't you try some of Grandma's cooking? It's really good, and eating this every day might even improve my study efficiency." "Julia, why would you say such a terrible thing? You don't understand how hard your mother has worked." As Mom expressed her outrage, Grandma calmly responded, "What struggles are you talking about? You've indulged Julia while being harsh on Caroline, and you haven't even prepared proper meals. What are you talking about?" Julia's exam success isn't thanks to you, it's the result of her own efforts. It's Caroline's fault for causing problems, isn't it? Mom showed her anger openly. Mom, it's okay. I already know the truth. I know I'm not really part of the family. That's why it's understandable that I'm in the way, not liked, and treated coldly. What do you mean? Both Mom and Julia exclaimed in surprise. Ah, you knew that? Yes, I've been raising someone else's child. You should be thankful. Maybe you were born from your father's affair, but I've endured it all this time. I've said it many times, but that's not true, Dad argued with a tired voice. If you doubt it so much, why not do a DNA test? Julia suggested. Hearing this, Mom's expression hardened. There's a reason I didn't want to do a DNA test. When we took in Caroline, I was pregnant and thought we would need to do a DNA test for Julia as well, Mom confessed. What? The whole family was shocked. I've been thinking about it for a long time. I know who Caroline's real parents are. It's clear she doesn't resemble my son or Tracy. But what about Julia? Why doesn't she look anything like him? Grandma questioned. Tracy, could it be Dad started doubting Mom? Are you doubting and hating me? Mom retorted angrily. Stop it, said the usually calm Grandpa as he raised his voice sternly towards Mom. At his stern rebuke, Mom seemed to lose her strength and broke down crying. I'm not the bad one, Mom defended herself through tears. It then became apparent that this whole turmoil was sparked by the fact that Mom had Julia with an affair partner. Before giving birth, Mom wasn't sure whose child it was, but she seemed to think that either way, it wouldn't be a problem. I can't believe it. Am I not really related by blood to Dad? Sis, Grandma, and Grandpa Julia, shocked by this revelation, stood frozen. Meanwhile, Dad observed the situation very calmly and spoke. I want a divorce, Dad announced. Why? That's all in the past, Mom argued. It's not just about the past. Your actions have been problematic for many years, and you've shown no signs of changing. Divorce is the only option, Dad replied. It was the first time I had seen Dad so angry. Julia, I know this is shocking, but Mom and I are going to get a divorce. It's up to you to decide who you want to stay with, Dad added. I don't want to stay with Mom. But if we're not related by blood, Julia was clearly confused. It's okay, Julia. I'm not related by blood either, but Grandma, Grandpa, and Dad are all my real family, I reassured her gently. That's right, Julia. If you wish, you can live here with us, Grandpa added. Julia nodded tearfully at Grandpa's words. Following that, the divorce was finalized, and Dad and Julia started a new life at Grandma and Grandpa's house. Julia was initially shocked, but now she has regained her spirits. She is happy to be eating Grandma's home-cooked meals daily and is delighted by her improved health. Mom initially lived alone in an apartment, but gradually, she found it difficult to pay the rent and decided to move back to her parents' home. Her decision to return to her parents' home ultimately worsened her situation. Surprised and intensely angry at Mom's sudden return, her parents took the drastic measure of disowning her. After that, there has been no information about Mom's whereabouts or condition, but Dad mentioned that she once reached out wanting to repair their relationship. However, Dad firmly declined her offer and chose to cut off all contact with her. In my own life, a conversation with a colleague at work about cooking blossomed into a discussion about Grandma's homemade recipes, which led to the idea of broadcasting them in videos. As a result, we launched a video series under the concept of youth making Grandma's recipes, which garnered significant attention from many people. The videos became even more popular, especially after my attractive younger sister Julia appeared in them, earning support from many viewers. Julia later started her career as a doctor at a university hospital and stepped back from the video broadcasting activities, but she continues to lead a healthy and active life. I myself married the colleague I co-starred with in the videos, and we are now expecting a new life. As the birth approaches, I ask Grandma, "When the baby is born, can you teach me how to make baby food?" To which she replied gently as always, "Leave it to me. I'll make plenty of delicious food to ensure the baby grows up healthy. The family table, where we all gather, continues to offer us enjoyable, delicious, and warm moments today. Both Grandpa and Grandma are healthy, and our everyday lives are always filled with happiness. Really? Then, which would you prefer, divorce or caregiving? The one who presented me with this extreme choice was my husband, in the 15th year of our marriage. For many years, he has despised and exploited me. At 43 years old, with dim prospects for remarriage, he probably doesn't expect me to choose divorce. He is forcing this cruel choice upon me, fully aware of that fact. I sighed quietly so that my husband couldn't hear. Any affection I once had for my husband had already vanished from my heart. And he still doesn't know the fact that I would not be troubled by anything even if we divorced. While watching my husband's unpleasant smirk, I took a deep breath. Then, to release the long-accumulated resentment, I stared back at him intently. My name is Joyce Hill. I turned 43 this spring. My marriage to Solomon began from a romance, and 15 years have passed. Our meeting started when Solomon approached me at the bar I frequented. This bar is so hidden, I didn't expect to find someone as young and charming as you here. Would you like to drink together? Initially, I saw him as a frivolous person, but as we talked more, I began to see his charm. Solomon listened to me attentively and always laughed joyfully. I was drawn to his smile, and eventually, we started dating. 2 years later, we decided to get married. Is it true that he has debts? You should avoid marrying such a person. Most of the hardships will fall on you. It's not just about the debt, but I feel like he's hiding something. I can't entrust my precious daughter to someone like that. After I introduced Solomon to my parents, they expressed their opposition to our marriage. Solomon had lost his father when he was young and struggled financially during his college days. He explained that he had incurred debts to cover tuition and living expenses, but my parents were skeptical of his story. Could he be falsifying something? Enough. Even if you both don't approve, I'm going to marry Solomon. I married Solomon despite my parents' objections. As a result, this issue caused my relationship with my parents to become distant. More precisely, I was the one who distanced myself from them. 15 years have passed since I married Solomon. I am now 43 years old, but we have never had children. Solomon treats me not as a wife, but as someone who does household chores. Initially, we were a loving couple. We'll have kids someday. We used to say as we both led busy lives. However, just a year after our marriage, the company I was working for went bankrupt. At that time, Zelda, my mother-in-law, who was living separately, made this suggestion while I was busy looking for a new job. Why don't you just stay at home? That way you'll have kids in no time. Show me my grandchildren soon. 6 months into our marriage, my mother-in-law had already started pressing us for children. She saw the bankruptcy of my company as a perfect opportunity for me to stop job hunting. Honestly, it's difficult to make ends meet on Solomon's income alone. He is still paying off his college debts, and the living expenses he can provide me are limited. Ignoring Zelda's words, I managed to find a new job, but this seemed to have backfired. After that, my mother-in-law started throwing harsh words at me. I want to see my grandchildren soon, but Joyce doesn't understand my wishes at all. Oh, I should have opposed the marriage. Solomon could have found someone much better suited for him. She calmly stated these words in front of me, and her sarcasm became even more severe. What a useless daughter-in-law. Can't you even do this? I'm sorry. Every weekend, my mother-in-law calls me over to handle a massive amount of household chores. Shopping, cleaning, cooking, laundry, the domestic tasks are all left to me. I comply with her demands to help her, but she never thanks me. Instead, she only complains about my household skills. When you cook, the food tastes awful. Even store-bought dishes would be better, she says. When I buy prepared dishes, she complains. That's cutting corners or the flavor is too strong. However, I can't complain directly to Solomon's mother, so I just keep enduring it. Worse, Solomon has gradually come under his mother's influence and has started looking down on me. It can't be helped that your career was reset by changing jobs, but with such a low salary, it's impossible to make a living, right? You understand that, don't you? I can't afford to support you alone, so I want you to earn at least $30,000 a year. That's the standard. Since it was right after I changed jobs, my income was very low. Solomon was dissatisfied with this and demanded that I earn more, and in addition, he pressed me to perfectly handle the household chores and deal with my mother-in-law. After returning home, he does no housework at all, and on weekends he goes out and has fun. Solomon gives me only a few $100s for living expenses, and he spends the rest on his hobbies and pleasures. The debts he had from his student days were, at some point, fully paid off. It later became clear that these debts were due to a gambling addiction, and his story of being a struggling student was a lie. After we got married, by me paying most of the living expenses, he managed to gain financial leeway and pay off his debts. However, even after repaying his debts, the amount of living expenses he provided me remained small. In this situation, I continued to live frugally, but Solomon blamed me, saying, "We're living like this because you don't earn more." Due to this stressful lifestyle, one day, I suddenly collapsed at work. The doctor diagnosed it as being due to overwork. When Solomon and his mother visited the hospital, they were angry that I collapsed from overwork. "You're too weak to collapse from something like this. Can you really live like this?" they criticized me. What Solomon is saying is right. Really, it's pathetic to collapse from overwork. What if people think we're pushing you too hard? It would be embarrassing for us, she added. Despite their lack of concern for me, I had no energy left to argue with them as my fatigue had accumulated. Gradually, their harsh treatment became a routine part of my days. The reason I endure the harsh treatment from Solomon and his mother is because I decided to marry him, ignoring my parents' objections. I've been pushing myself because I took a strong stance against my parents, and I can't just give up because of a few difficulties. While enduring this, I suddenly realized that 15 years had passed since my marriage. During this time, Solomon and his mother's treatment of me has never improved. I've always been treated like their servant. I no longer have the energy to fight back. However, recently her health has worsened, and I've been called more frequently to take care of her. "Mother-in-law, you should go to the hospital." I've been doing the household chores at her house every week. But about a month ago, I noticed that her complexion was bad. Today, she looked particularly unwell, giving out orders in a harsh tone while sitting in her chair. Having been treated like a servant for years, I'm used to it, but I can't overlook someone who looks sick right in front of me. Still, she seems to dislike my concern. Stop playing doctor. I'll decide about my own health. But quiet. While shouting, she threw a cup from the table in my direction. However, lacking strength, the cup didn't reach me and fell at her feet instead. "What are you doing?" "Pick up that cup and clean it up." Seemingly wanting to get away from me quickly, She staggered up from her chair and went into the next room. I silently wiped up the contents of the cup that had fallen to the floor. Well, she's so energetic, she must be fine. I had been discussing her health with Solomon, but he showed little interest. Taking care of my mother is your job, isn't it? There's not much I can do if you tell me about it. Normally I say nothing, but this time I wanted to retort, but she's your mother, isn't she? But retorting wouldn't change the situation. If anything, it would just lead to Solomon complaining more. Lately, Solomon's return home has been getting later. I haven't had the chance to discuss her condition, and the days just pass by. And then one day, everything changed. What? My mother-in-law was rushed to the emergency room. I received a call from the hospital while I was at the office. They tried calling Solomon, but he didn't answer, so the call eventually came to me. I hurriedly wrapped up my work and headed to the hospital. She had collapsed while shopping at a local deli. According to the doctor, although her life was not in danger, she would need support for daily activities after being discharged. Can it be? Until now, she had lived separately from us, and that distance was what made my difficult life somewhat bearable. But if we were to live together, I had not been disturbed by her harassment over the past 15 years, but now I was filled with anxiety. If I were to live with her, would I be able to maintain my mental health? After hearing the situation at the hospital, I left her in the doctor's care and returned home. Solomon hadn't come to the hospital, he was waiting at home. When I explained what had happened, he became angry. Why didn't you take her to the hospital sooner? It's your fault that my mother ended up in this condition. I had repeatedly urged her to go to the hospital, but she wouldn't listen to me. I had consulted Solomon about it, but he found it too bothersome and did nothing. Really, is this my fault? As I silently pondered, Solomon sighed heavily. Then, he made an unbelievable suggestion. Now that things have come to this, there's no choice but to have my mother live here. We'll sell her house and land. Of course, you will take on the caregiving. Using caregiving services would be too expensive, so I'm leaving all of her care to you. What? But then I won't be able to continue working. What are you talking about? It's only natural that you continue with your job and the housework as before. Saying that you can't do your job or housework because of caregiving is just an excuse. Faced with Solomon's unreasonable remarks, I was simply stunned. Does he really think I can handle caregiving, work, and household chores all by myself? It's impossible. At these words that slipped out unexpectedly, Solomon reacted, If we're going to take care of your mother here, we must share the responsibilities of household and caregiving. It's impossible for me to do everything alone. Solomon looked surprised at my rebuttal. Having spent the past 15 years mostly without defiance, not only he but also I was surprised by my own reaction. However, those spontaneous words highlighted how unrealistic his demands were. Solomon frowned and retorted, Is that so? Then, which would you prefer, divorce or caregiving? Choose either. I don't care. While saying this, Solomon gave an unpleasant smirk, imposing a tremendous choice on me. You're not on good terms with your parents, and if we divorce, who will you rely on? It'll be difficult for a woman alone to live decently. With such a low salary, if you leave me, that's the end. Without me, could you even survive? Thus, Solomon confidently indicated that divorce was not an option for me. Witnessing him looking down on me with such arrogance, it felt like something inside me broke. All right then, I choose divorce. I'm moving out today. Why don't you ask your 23-year-old lover to take care of her? What? Surprised by my unexpected response, Solomon let out a jesting tone I had never heard before. His voice sounded so pitiful that I almost laughed, but I thought better of it, as laughing would not help the situation progress. Holding back my laughter, I pulled out something I had been hiding in my bag for a long time. "Here, take this." While puzzled, Solomon took the bulging brown envelope I offered him. As he checked the contents of the envelope, his face gradually turned pale. "What is this?" As Solomon's voice trembled, I answered calmly, "It's evidence of your affair with your 23-year-old lover." The envelope contained numerous photographs. In the photos, Solomon was seen intimately linking arms with a young woman. Solomon's return home had started to get later 6 months ago. At that time, I began to suspect his dishonest actions, but I had yet to obtain concrete evidence. However, his consistently cheerful demeanor when he came home every day intuitively told me something was off. So I hired a detective and discovered that he was indeed having an affair. His affair partner was a 23-year-old stripper. He first visited the cabaret club as part of a business association. Solomon, inherently frivolous, had dated several women before our marriage, but it seemed that these women issues had resolved after he shifted his interests elsewhere post-marriage. However, one day, invited to a strip club by a business contact, he met a woman who perfectly matched his ideals and fell for her instantly. Since then, he has been pouring his salary into that strip club, eventually forming an intimate relationship with the stripper. Your affair partner? She's cute and young, but do you think she can take care of your mother? Your mother likes to give orders, and she will be even more demanding after she's discharged. Pointing to the woman in the photos, I confronted Solomon. No, this is a misunderstanding. It was just a bit of fun, not an affair. He stammered, his previous confidence vanished, and he began to offer a feeble excuse. "Oh, just a bit of fun, huh?" "Yes, that's right." I didn't intend to do anything serious. Cutting off his excuses, I sighed heavily and stopped the conversation. Then, I pulled out my smartphone and played an audio file. "I'll divorce my wife soon, and then I'll marry you right after. I'll protect you for the rest of your life." Hearing Solomon's sweet voice from the smartphone, I grimaced with discomfort. Meanwhile, Solomon, pale-faced, stared at me, demanding to know why I had such a thing. "This is just a part of the evidence collected by the detective agency. There are loads of your call records with her. And whether or not you were serious doesn't matter. Having an affair with someone else while married to me is clearly infidelity." While saying that, I selected a photo from the stack of evidence and showed it to Solomon. In the photo, they were captured entering a hotel, arms linked intimately. "Do you want to see more? I can show you plenty of other evidence. Are you still planning to make excuses?" Solomon shuddered at my challenging question. He probably realized that he could no longer talk his way out of this. Changing tactics, he began to accuse me. "Hey, did you use my money to hire a detective? Using my hard-earned money for such wasteful spending? Give me back my money." Caught off guard by this unexpected attack, I was momentarily at a loss for words. Solomon seized this opportunity to further his verbal assault. "Do you know how much it costs to hire a detective? Using my money for such a ridiculous investigation? You're the worst wife. Well, if you return the money with interest, I might forgive you this time." Seeing Solomon twist the situation for his own benefit, I was utterly astounded and asked, "When did you become so petty?" Struggling to maintain my composure, I calmly retorted to Solomon, "I used my own savings for the detective. I haven't touched your money at all, so no worries there. That can't be true. There's no way you have that much money to hire a detective. Or, did you not know that I was recently promoted to department manager? I'm earning quite a sum now. Solomon was visibly shocked by this unexpected revelation. After graduating from college, the company where I had worked for a long time went bankrupt due to the economic downturn. In my next job, I started from scratch as a basic sales clerk, despite leveraging my experience. I was initially placed in a sales administration role, but there was a system in place that promised additional bonuses for success, not just a base salary. Content at first with the administrative position, I faced Solomon's complaints of earn more and directly requested my boss for a transfer to sales. The sales role was challenging, but I embraced the challenge and became the first person to transition from an administrative to a sales role at the company. At the time, the company was seriously short-staffed in sales, and help was desperately needed. After handing over the sales admin tasks to a newly joined female employee, I started focusing entirely on sales. The sales job was indeed tough, but it turned out to be surprisingly suitable for me. I achieved results that matched those of my male colleagues and gradually earned recognition, leading to multiple promotions. Now, I hold the position of department manager. While many women interrupt their careers for childbirth and childcare, I was able to continue working because Solomon and I didn't have children. This allowed me to build and advance my career. Had we had children, my career might have been interrupted, and divorcing Solomon could have been more complicated. Why didn't you tell me something so important? I tried to tell you. But whenever I tried to talk, you hardly listened, did you? When I decided to transition from sales administration to a sales position, I attempted to share this with Solomon. However, he said, "Work talk? Spare me. I don't want to hear about it when I come home. I'm tired." And with that, he never listened to the end of my story. With each promotion, I tried again to tell Solomon, but he never seemed interested in listening. Despite his constant demands for me to earn more, he showed no real interest in what kind of work I was doing or how much I was actually earning. It was last winter when I saw the amount of the bonus I received from the company, and a thought struck me. If I'm handling such a large amount of money, I could live comfortably on my own. I had never thought that way before, but at that moment, it just came to me naturally. Perhaps I had been harboring some dissatisfaction with my situation for a long time. I had married Solomon despite strong opposition from my parents, telling myself that I must overcome any difficulties to stay with him. However, even with such determination, there are limits to what one can endure. After 15 years of marriage, I finally reached that limit. Following this realization, I decided to divorce and hired a detective for that purpose. While I had suspected Solomon's dishonest behavior, I had not yet taken any concrete steps. Until now, I had not considered divorce as an option, convincing myself that I should stay with Solomon no matter how hard it was. However, the moment I decided to divorce, I took action. I finally obtained proof of the affair, and now I am confronting Solomon. Solomon has not treated me as an equal. To him, I was merely a convenient tool, routinely belittled and treated like a servant. Before our marriage, he was kind and listened to me. However, at some point, he changed into this cold person. Perhaps I just hadn't noticed before, but maybe Solomon was always like this. Who would want to stay with such a person? Normally, it's impossible. That's why I chose divorce. I definitely do not want to take care of a mother-in-law who has never valued me from the start. Even if offered money, I would refuse. After her collapse, my mother-in-law's body became frail, but her mind remained sharp. If I were to care for her at home after her discharge, it's certain she would treat me more like a servant than before. I would consider caregiving if she respected and appreciated me, but expecting such an attitude from her is unrealistic. When Solomon confidently forced me to choose between caregiving and divorce, my mind was already made up. I should tell you, I earn more than you do. What? Despite your lack of substantial contributions to our living expenses, the fact you never questioned our lifestyle shows how oblivious you are. The reason you could eat every day is because I was earning. It seems you still don't understand, but you're the one who would be in trouble if we divorced. Solomon, who has always looked down on me, is clearly upset to learn that I earn more. His face turns red, his lips press tightly together, and he trembles with anger as he glares at me. As I watch him in disbelief, he blurts out something unexpected. Fine, I get it. I want a divorce from such an arrogant woman like you. In exchange, give me half of your savings. There's such a thing as division of property. His foolishness makes me look up to the sky in frustration. But I quickly return my gaze to him and deliver a further blow with a cold voice. If you're going to claim division of property, you'll need to speak to my lawyer. What? A lawyer? Are you surprised? I've already contracted a lawyer to handle the division of assets. If Solomon had said he would take care of his mother's caregiving himself, I would have reconsidered the divorce and put the lawyer on hold. Originally, I had intended to overlook Solomon's infidelity and get through this tough period together. I hadn't expected him to make such a proposal, but it ended up this way. Solomon clearly became flustered the moment he heard the word lawyer. A lawyer, is that? Isn't this something we can handle ourselves? There's no need to go that far. You've never listened to me properly and have ignored me all along. That's why I think it's impossible for us to resolve this alone. Moreover, I want you to take responsibility for everything that's happened, and involving a professional is the best way to ensure that. Solomon looked around anxiously with a pale face. Did you really think you did nothing wrong? At that, Solomon's face contorted even more. He had demeaned and treated me like a servant, but he seemingly never anticipated being retaliated against in such a manner. His selfish actions made me regret marrying him and resent my own choices. Then, I'll start packing. You figure out the rest. As I said this and began to leave, Solomon suddenly reached out and grabbed the hem of my clothes. Wait. Let go. I don't have any money. I frowned at Solomon's sudden confession. I got obsessed with the stripper and bought her lots of designer goods to get her attention. Because of that, my savings are almost gone. That's why I don't have any money to give you. Recently, I've even been borrowing a bit from my mother's pension. Unbelievable. You've been using your own mother's pension. This was the first I'd heard of it, but it seemed like something Solomon would do. A thought suddenly struck me. You never talked about living together before, but as soon as your mother got sick, you suggested it. Not really for her sake, but for your own benefit, right? Are you trying to sell her house and land to get the money? At my words, Solomon awkwardly diverted his gaze. The nausea stirred within me knowing my husband could act so calculatingly. You're truly despicable. To do such things for your own gain. I've been treated horribly by your mother, but I do feel sorry for her having such a son. However, while I might feel a hint of sympathy, I'm not about to forgive all her past actions. I shook off Solomon's hand and declared coldly, "It doesn't matter that your savings are depleted." If necessary, I'll have your wages garnished to cover the costs. I have a divorce lawyer who's experienced in these matters. Wait, please reconsider. I'm begging you. It's impossible. No matter how firmly I refused, Solomon showed no signs of giving up easily. He knelt down as if atoning for a grave sin, desperately begging for forgiveness. I'm truly sorry. From now on, I'll change and start over. I'll help with my mother's care, of course, and I'll actively assist with the household chores. And I'll never cheat again. If you divorce me, my life has no future, he pleaded. It seemed he finally understood that his daily life couldn't function without me. But it was too late. How can I believe your words now after years of betrayal? You are incredibly naive and detached from reality. I am determined to go through with this divorce by any means necessary, I stated resolutely. No way, Solomon exclaimed in shock. What you are about to face is the natural consequence of your continuous disregard for me. Just quietly accept it. Be prepared, I told him. A look of complete despair crossed Solomon's face, and he collapsed weakly to the floor. Following that, we formally proceeded with the divorce and successfully settled the division of assets with the help of a lawyer. Solomon decided to take care of his mother and sold the house and land she owned. He then used the proceeds from the sale to pay the alimony. After the divorce, Solomon, now left only with the stripper he had been involved with, proposed marriage to her. My wife has left me, and I've lost everything. You're all I have left. Help me, marry me, and take care of my mother. However, the stripper firmly rejected his proposal. She was only using Solomon's emotions for her business, confused by genuine affection, and sternly rejected him, insisting he never come to the club again. When Solomon proposed marriage to the young stripper, intending for her to take care of his mother, it was an unbearable request for her. Solomon, once charming, seemed to have lost his ability to understand women over time. 15 years had passed, and the man he once was no longer existed. Ultimately, his relationship with the stripper he met at the strip club ended with him being banned from the establishment. All the money and time he had invested there vanished without yielding anything. I did not demand an apology from the stripper. When I found out his affair partner worked at the strip club, I intuitively understood it was part of her professional behavior. I am grateful to her for cooperating to smooth the divorce process. Meanwhile, my mother-in-law was initially pleased to hear about our divorce but found reality far from her expectations after being discharged from the hospital. She suffers under Solomon's inadequate care and repeatedly pleads for my return. Why did you divorce Joyce? You are the reason I am suffering so much. She lashes out at her son. She seems utterly unaware that she was part of the reason for our divorce. If she had been more understanding, she might not have left Solomon alone, and perhaps we would not have divorced. However, my mother-in-law is very self-centered, much like Solomon. Financially unable to afford caregiving services, Solomon finds himself in a dire situation regarding his mother's care. Thinking of this as a long-deserved punishment for their treatment of me, I sometimes feel that this is still relatively mild. Their future seems wrapped in misfortune and darkness. Whatever future awaits them, I find myself detached from any particular feelings about it. It's their just dessert, I think, without much emotion. After the divorce, I visited my parents' home to apologize sincerely for my past actions. I was prepared for potential estrangement, but contrary to my expectations, my parents warmly welcomed me back. If you are happy, then we are satisfied, my parents told me. Yes, you are always our beloved daughter. Your happiness is the most important thing to us." My mother added, "Mom, Dad, thank you so much." I expressed my deep gratitude. In fact, my parents had forgiven me from the beginning, and I am just grateful for their tolerance. Currently, I have rented a new apartment near my parents' home and have started a new chapter. Although my job remains busy as before, not having to worry about Solomon or Zelda has significantly eased my life. In the future, even if I have the opportunity to remarry, I plan to be more cautious when choosing a partner. But for now, I think it might be quite nice to spend some time alone. I am considering enjoying this independent life. I cherish these peaceful days.